Hi, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today we are joined with by Sawyer. Sawyer, first of all, thanks so much for joining us, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to the show.
For sure, JP, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself. So I'm a paralegal and notary public. I've been practicing for just about 2 years now. I think literally at the end of this month will be my official 2 year receiving my license. But I run my own practice as of right now. Previously, I worked for a firm and was a law clerk for some years before that. But I work in provincial offenses, some landlord-tenant board, and small claims, but have prior experience as well in different kinds of tribunals, Repair and Storage Liens Act, and I also work in heavily in compliance and regulatory body fields. So a little bit of everything, but we'll go from there.
Perfect. And so here, I mean, it's also simulcast with our Paralegal Town Hall's phenomenal paralegals podcasts that we have. So, I mean, what does it mean, I guess, to be a paralegal? And, maybe you can highlight a little bit about your journey to, you talked about a bunch of different roles you have now, but kind of where you're settled in now and what you've learned along the way.
For sure. I guess what it means to be a paralegal is obviously, the designation that is codified in the law societies, bylaws, statutes, and everything therein. But truly, for me, a paralegal is a legal professional who really knows their scope, goes beyond the threshold of, representing their clients and filling that void that is there within the legal field, that clients are really looking for support in, and which obviously became this paralegal scope of practice. But as far as my paralegal journey kind of goes, for many years, I started in school right after I got into high school. I wanted to be in something in media. I wanted to be in marketing, all that kind of stuff. I got into that field and ended up hating it. I ended up working for a property management company for several years. And all of a sudden, I got a really good experience in working with the landlord tenant board side of things because I was dealing with rental management. So I actually appeared in landlord tenant board a few times as a landlord's agent. And I just really enjoyed the process of building a case, learning the law, and all those things. And eventually, I just took the dive and went back to school. And that's actually where I ended up meeting you. You were one of my professors at Seneca. And I ended up completing my paralegal certificate at Seneca through their night school program. And I got my license shortly after. And then I worked straight into a paralegal firm. And that's where I built up my experience. And really, I think the joy of all of that is that through all my studies, through practice, and through everything therein, especially for paralegals, there's so many people that have that same kind of experience that they came from a different kind of path before. They had a different profession. Some of them, this is a second career. Some people, this is their first career. But it is such a diverse and such a very cool profession that's been built out because so many people from so many different walks of life walk into it rather than the kind of traditional career path that you see with lawyers and every other different kind of profession they're in. So I think that's really important to think about when it comes to paralegals as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I quoted from you a few times recently is you referenced the word paralegal and the prefix para meanings besides, and I think a lot of times in the legal profession, and I see it from the other side of the equation, being a lawyer, is that a lot of paralegals maybe they've had some negative experiences with lawyers, and then they kind of generalize that like, well, all lawyers are going to hold paralegals back. And then, then that also creates kind of some low-hanging fruit because on one side you have lawyers, maybe criticizing, paralegals, and then on the other side you have paralegals basically saying like the lawyers are denying them. And so the way you kind of phrase it is, look, we work beside, we're legal professionals, we're licensees. So maybe you want to expand on, kind of putting that together and what you've shared about it, because I mean, the reality is, and as the paralegal town hall that Justin and I founded, with the lawyer and a paralegal working beside each other, is done to sort of integrate the two professions. So maybe you can expand further on that.
For sure. And firstly, I want to give a big shout to you guys for doing that because I think the Paralegal Town Hall, even in this last year or so, just since you guys have started it, has grown to such a great powerhouse and such a great opportunity for like paralegals, especially. to come forward. But so many different lawyers and different kind of legal professionals have all joined up through this, and it's given them a great opportunity. So I want to give you your flowers for that, so to speak. But no, kind of what you were referencing with that quote I kind of made was that came from the post that I made on LinkedIn, which actually ended up going in the paralegal town hall, I guess, newsletter, and then actually also was published by Law 360, subject to a few changes and additions I made to fill the quota. But really what inspired me with that post was we're seeing that the paralegal profession is taking over North America in different states. Different states down in the US have gone and now actually created licensed paralegals. Washington State was one of them, Arizona, Utah, all these different places. And specifically to the same kind of gap that is needing to be filled that you saw in Ontario previously with agents who then became, paralegals in air quotes, and then officially paralegals once they became licensed by the Law Society. Unfortunately, and I mentioned this in my post, all too common is the line in the sand where, oh, is it too much to be saying that someone should be able to practice and represent clients for a fee with not as much legal training, with not as much, requirements for them to get a license to practice in a specified scope, all those sorts of things. The sad side of that is, and you said it perfectly, is that there's paralegals who might feel slighted by that kind of sentiment, and then it creates this kind of rift where there shouldn't be one. And really, I think that's where the whole term paralegal, coming from the Greek meaning beside, para meaning beside or in tandem with, really needs to be looked at when you're a paralegal or even a lawyer dealing with a paralegal, is that there's not a replacement, there's not a one is better than the other, and there's not a really, or there at least there shouldn't be any kind of sentiment of that, you know, these are really different things. Or if they are different, again, one is better than the other. Really, at the end of the day, especially in Ontario, we're both regulated professionals. We have very similar rules and requirements, and we both pay fees, and we go through the same rigmarole to keep our licenses and maintain them, and even get to the same spot where we can receive a license as each other. And that doesn't make us different, and that doesn't make us the same, but it almost makes us like cousins, or at least, siblings. And I think that far too often that gets lost in both sides. Paralegals who have this sentiment that lawyers look down on them, and then lawyers who might think that paralegals, don't quite meet the mark. And it's sad to see that start to come in, different U.S. states. I've seen a lot of lawyers and attorneys down there on LinkedIn and different kinds of reports all kind of share that same sentiment. And then even in places like British Columbia, where licensed paralegals and one unified legal regulator now with the changes that they're seeing in the Law Society of British Columbia, that's now becoming a common argument again. And it's just unfortunate to see because, unfortunately, depending on your definition, paralegals are here to stay, especially in Ontario. But it shouldn't be something that should be seen as, watering down the legal profession. It shouldn't be something that is, drawing a line in the sand. It should really be there is clearly a void that needs to be filled here. If this is the way to do it, how do we work together? And I think that's what a lot of lawyers and paralegals need to have. And I'm very fortunate to have been met with many different lawyers and paralegals throughout my career thus far that have luckily not had that sentiment. You, of course, being one of them. But I think that's really the cognizance that needs to change through the legal profession to make sure that that doesn't become the same kind of sentiment across the board, which we're unfortunately seeing in different spades here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I always, use the phrase I have is the Meghan Markleization of the term because, on Suits, she starts off as a paralegal, and given the popularity, I would imagine was probably, if not the most watched of sort of these legal dramas over the most recent times, but one of them, and especially, going on to become, involved there with Prince Harry and such that, everyone could recognize that. But the problem is, as you point out, there are a few states that are kind of trending in that direction. There is obviously British Columbia that is very close to going in there. Saskatchewan, a few places are doing some kind of pilot projects or sandbox sort of ways that, not lawyers can can provide legal services, but ultimately, in most places, when you look at the word paralegal, wherever it's used, it's sort of more synonymous with a legal assistant. So it creates that confusion, even in Ontario, right? Because people don't realize that there are lawyers that are practicing for 25, 30, 35 years, who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even right now, and they practice at a time when paralegals were not licensed and were only doing certain things, and there was a lot of issues, right? Because you didn't need to get a license, you didn't need to have education, you didn't have to have experience, you didn't have to have errors and omissions insurance. So I think you're sort of facing all that. Even it takes 20 years later that the younger lawyers are probably a little bit more attuned to that of how they can work with paralegals. So I mean, what do you think can be changed in terms of improving those relationships from the perspective of a paralegal that you've seen, and you said you've highlighted some good lawyer mentors you've had or navigating the process. I mean, what do you think needs to be done to kind of on both sides really? Because I think you can't just expect lawyers to kind of welcome you with open arms if I mean, like I've been in rooms where, I'm walking in, I'm like, hey, I put on this event, and then the paralegals get up and they're like, oh, those lawyers are, they don't help us at all. And I'm like, well, wait a second, right? So what do you think needs to be done?
For sure. The simplest way I can describe it, because especially not so long ago, I was invited to be a speed mentor for the Law Society's paralegal reception for newly licensed paralegals. And it was strange because, I had been there previously as a newly licensed paralegal, but I was very fortunate enough to be invited back and, give perspectives and give guidance and advice to paralegals just starting, especially that I was so more freshly in their shoes. Um, the biggest thing that I told these newer paralegals, and I would even say is kind of a whole to paralegals, whether you're in your first few years of experience, or even if you're trying to find that niche and fill this kind of gap in your career, is really, like you said, you can't always expect that lawyers or even other paralegals are going to accept you with open arms. But I think the thing is, and how this kind of perception can change and how this line in the sand can really be done away with or washed away, is being the best paralegal you can be. The unfortunate side of being a newer profession is there's a lot of people who are still unsure of what a paralegal is and what a paralegal can fulfill. And to use the example you used, there's lawyers for many years who did not see paralegals as licensed legal professionals and didn't know them as licensed legal professionals. And they were at the time synonymous with law clerks or legal secretaries or these unlicensed agents who are basically the Wild West. Now that we are a licensed profession, we pay fees, we hold errors and omissions insurance, and all these things. That needs to be the consideration. That needs to be the education that the public's getting, because all too many times when I worked at a firm previously, I remember even we got a call and the lady kept referring to us as lawyers. And I just said to her on the phone, I was like, well, I need you to understand, like, we're paralegals, not lawyers. So we do have a certain scope of what we can do. She's like, oh, so you guys are in training then? Yeah. I was like, no, we're not in training. We're all done, depending on where we want to be with our career and our training. But that's kind of the thing, is that first and foremost, you need to know your scope in and out. If you're a paralegal, you really need to know how you can fit in the legal sphere and what you can provide, not just to the public, but also to, if you're working in a law firm environment, or if you're going to be working as your own solo practitioner, your kind of scope and what you can do. I know quite a few paralegals, so most of them friends of mine, who work in a law firm environment that were law clerks before, but now that they've received a paralegal license, they are, very lucky because they are working with their bosses to do things like, take on certain kinds of litigation, fill supports, and really be there in the different ways that they can help boost that firm that they're in, or take on a book of business that now opens up the firm to a lot more. So really, the best advice I can say for paralegals who feel that there's this kind of rift, or that there's this question mark beside what a paralegal is know your scope and what a paralegal can and can't do, whether you're in sole practice or a firm, know how you can benefit the public and a client, but also your place of business, and really just see all of us the same way when it comes to lawyers and paralegals, and see us as, obviously, don't think of yourself as a lawyer and think that you can walk into the Supreme Court and do all the same things that a lawyer can do, but really see it as we both have the same regulator. We both pay very similar fees. We both have the requirements for insurance. We have the same requirements for CPDs, all those sorts of things. They are not, someone on the other side of they're not on the other side of the sports field. They're not an opposite team. We're the same team cheering for the same thing. They just are in a different class. That's really the only way I'd describe it.
Yeah, it's kind of actually, we could switch a little bit here because we're talking about classes and it reminds me of weight classes, right? And I know you do a lot of MMA there. So kind of how do you find balance? And it's one of the things there of all the things that you're doing with things like that and being able to sort of navigate, a bunch of different roles and taking time for yourself as well. And you find any parallels between the two. I know you did some little acting as well. I think you're trying to produce something next. So sign me up there if that goes anywhere. But yeah, let me know about kind of
Sure.
how all that fits in. And I think that's an important thing that we don't really talk about as much is because, if you are running in your own practice or if you are doing a bunch of little side projects, because it doesn't have to be this lineal path that you essentially, get a job, you work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, whatever it is, and then you go home and then you have your own separate things afterwards. So what can you share about all those little things and how they kind of intertwine with one another?
For sure, and to that point, because you mentioned a few things I do in there. A good friend of mine who he's a lawyer, but he doesn't practice at this time. But he runs a marketing firm for lawyers and paralegals and people who need their firms. And when me and him first met, and I was talking about all the things I do, he's like, the more I know about you, the more questions I have, because he's like, none of this sounds, like really well conjoined and all that. He's like, you're kind of all over the place, but in a good, fun way. So really, like with my day to day, like I have a full time employment with a regulatory body where I'm a compliance officer. So I'm ensuring that licensed condo managers with the CMREO that they're maintaining compliance with their rules and their regulations, and obviously taking it further if there's allegations of misconduct, some adjudicating and mediating it there. So that's my main job. But I run my own firm at the same time. And luckily, I'm in a great environment where it not only are, side hustles, I say in air quotes, because I'm doing just as much full time legal work as I am with my full time job, I would say. But it's not only, an opportunity that I can do that, but it's actually employed. My boss is a lawyer. She has her own firm. One of the guys on my team, he's a realtor. Everyone has their own little thing. Um, so already having that kind of experience, the way I would describe balance is it depends on the day, it depends on the week. I find way too much in the legal profession, especially those in their first few years, whether you're articling, whether you're, taking on a position at a firm, whether you're doing your paralegal placement or you're out there in the legal field. I think what happens all too often is that people get in, they have to burn through and make that name for themselves in the legal field. And then, they lose things like, oh, I used to do a sport. Oh, I used to, play an instrument. Oh, I used to do those sorts of things. I would say have an anchor for yourself on what truly you like to balance and what you like to do. Because for me right now, I've got, my main hustle, my, again, air quotes, side hustle. I do mixed martial arts. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I dabble in music every so often, and I dabble in background acting every so often. And all that on top of wedding planning. So for later this summer. So really, for me, balance at this time depends on the day and depends on the week. I know that at this time, certain side passion projects are not going to be the forefront because, you know, job's important, firm is important, fiance and wedding planning is very important. But for me, my kind of balance is knowing that if I can go to jujitsu twice a week, that is a good balance because I need that experience. I need that. That is my anchor to kind of keep me stable to know that, okay, I'm staying healthy. I'm doing something. I'm seeing my friends. I'm learning a new skill. I'm getting my mind off of straight litigation, compliance, prosecution, all those sorts of things. And I think that's what you really have to know about yourself because many of my friends who, graduated at the same time as me, got licensed the same time as me, they got into their positions similar to, where I've worked previously, where you're doing a whole lot of work to make that name for yourself, to, be the best paralegal you can be, and all those sorts of things. But then things like, when I went to my gym after a couple months, they kind of said, I'm sorry, we don't recognize you because we haven't seen you in forever. And similar, friends of mine who, have kind of forgotten what stuff they were into, or even my fiance, who's a paralegal as well. She's had to kind of reignite her passion for certain things after, previously working in a very fast-paced, busy firm and now moving to another fast-paced, busy firm. So really, you don't always have to have an explicit plan of I'm going to go 2 days a week to this. I'm going to, make sure I'm doing these sorts of things because stuff comes up and stuff changes. But so long as you have that anchor for, okay, I really love playing guitar. Okay, I really love, going to do the tango. Like I really love to play soccer, those sorts of things, if you can know that that is what you want to do and that is part of who you are, keep those things readily accessible because you will be able to really help balance and have a healthy approach to your stuff. Because if you're just doing litigation all day, especially for paralegals, everything we do has to be tied to a proceeding of some sort or even an intended proceeding. uh, you got to have a way to balance that out and clear your mind a little bit. And whether it's sports, whether it's fencing, whether it's playing an instrument, or even just watching TV, make sure that you're building time for yourself with that, but really have it as an anchor. Because if you have the expectation that every week is going to be the same, last minute hearings are going to come up. A CPD hour that you forgot to do is going to have to come up, and that's going to take your time. Really just have a few things in mind is really just what I would say.
Perfect. And so, you touched on obviously scope and I know you do work in condominium law. And sorry, referencing your fiance as well. I know that that firm does this work there too. But it tends to not be an area that paralegals really get into. And I know there's been a push. I saw some, I think it's TMU has a program for next year that they're kind of hopefully getting some more interest in that. But maybe you can talk a bit about the area of condo law. And I mean, it's usually like a one class in tribunals, like, hey, by the way, there's this condo CAO there, the tribunal, but or the cat, sorry, I
Yeah,
remember all the cat pictures on my slides there, but um, it doesn't get as much focus as many other areas. But maybe you can share a little bit about what happens there and what you do, and what are some options for paralegals in those areas.
for sure. So with my work with the CMREO, I'm expressly dealing with condo managers and condominium management firms. So those are the ones so to work in a condominium as a condo manager or to provide condominium management services, per the definitions in the CMSA, the Condominium Management Services Act, you need to be licensed by the CMREO. There's limited licenses, there's general licenses, and then there's licenses for for if you wanted to run that as a business and provide those services. So I'm working on the side of the regulator, basically kind of thinking of it as the same time as like, the LSO in their capacity. And, whenever I'm dealing with complaints, I usually say something along the lines of, similar to how the Law Society, if you complain about a lawyer, paralegal who messed up your case, Law Society won't fix your case necessarily, but they will go after that individual for their misconduct. Same thing with the CMREO. So I'm in a space where I'm dealing with just the licensees and their actions and their duties and making sure that they are compliant. But also if there's, any findings of misconduct through my, investigations, ADR, and anything like that, it gets taken a step further with the CMRO's prosecutions. But realistically, condo law as a whole for paralegals, I'm very blessed to have that opportunity there, and I've learned so much about condo law, and especially, just in my assessments of making sure that our condo managers also understand condo law because it is part of their courses that they need to do to get their license at the end of the day. Really, for paralegals, condo law is this hidden gem of opportunity for many of them because you do have a set scope for what you can do. Certainly, much of what goes on about drafting bylaws, taking things, and chairing meetings and making changes for the corporation as a solicitor, you can't do as a paralegal. But anything of enforcing the bylaws on an individual owner, taking things to the condo authority tribunal, or even representing an individual owner against the condo board or anything of that nature, goes through the condo authority tribunal. They do have a very limited scope, but they have many areas that are all very accessible for paralegals and actually would rather come up, especially for those that dabble in LTB. And I say dabble very loosely, but I mean those that are well versed in landlord tenant board. Really, I highly suggest all paralegals, at the very least, even if it's not the TMU course, but in some capacity, if you're learning a lot about condo laws and the things there is, I've seen it many a times that, and not even just in my work with CMRA, but in cases I've read and things I've seen. Unfortunately, a lot of people kind of go in with this mentality of, oh, it's like the RTA, oh, it's like the LTB. It is not. You are looking at things about the reasonableness of bylaws, the reasonableness of, chargebacks, those sorts of things. And if you don't really know the scope, you're going to crash and burn, which is why I think that TMU course, I'm on the line of if I'm going to take it or not. We'll see if it's something I can do, if I have time for it. But really, I suggest every paralegal learns that stuff because, at the very least, if you're not going to take things to the condo authority tribunal, you could at least kind of know if you're taking on an LTV matter and you're dealing with something that has a condo element to it, you're going to at least know the forum of whether or not that's something that you're going to need to take up at the landlord tenant board, or if that's something that could potentially go to the condo authority tribunal. So it's really something that, like you said, it's not really taught. It's one of those. I think it's like one of the evening classes or one of the things you learn in the tribunals course in the paralegal courses, but. Really, it's something paralegals, especially with how common condominiums are becoming across Ontario, you should all be learning.
Now, earlier you touched on the speed mentoring event hosted by the Law Society a few weeks ago, as well as you had the opportunity to deliver the oath, the paralegal oath at our oath and commissioning ceremony. So maybe you could share kind of how those experiences, or elaborate a little bit more on those experiences and the importance of mentoring and connecting with the next generation. As you highlighted, it wasn't too long ago that you were an attendee at the welcome reception and an attendee at the speed mentoring, and kind of a full circle moment for you. And why is that important for our young paralegal profession? Less than 20 years now, right? That you kind of connect with people and you network and you grow that way.
For sure. And first of all, those were both great opportunities. Again, first of all, thank you to the Paralegal Town Hall for giving me that spot at the oath ceremony to deliver that oath. That was a great experience. And same to the Law Society and Justin individually for extending me the paralegal mentoring session, giving me that opportunity as well. But um, to go to the first part of that, the oath ceremony. First of all, history was made in that room. That was amazing to have a full group of paralegals having the oath recited in Osgoode Hall. That was amazing. Um, and to tie that in with the speed mentoring as well is opportunities like that. I think many paralegals kind of miss out on, and I think that's now becoming less and less of a thing through the paralegal town hall. And I see like other advocacy groups are all kind of uniting a little bit more, or otherwise just having a lot of expansion on opportunities like that because I would really say that networking is by far the most important thing you can do as a legal professional, and I'll tie it even to because I'm a sole practitioner for the first time in 2025. I have to do the Foundations of Sole Practice course by the Law Society, so I'm mostly done through that. But one of the things they actually talk about as a support is, and it's many lawyers and many paralegals on the same panel talking about how if you're not working in a setting where you're in chambers or you're in a shared office or you're in anything like that, your social media and your phone is your biggest assistance at the end of the day. And that goes from something as getting an agent to appear on your behalf if you can't get a date rescheduled by the court. Or it even goes so far as to, hey, have you dealt with this before? Can you help me? And I really think that's the one thing that many new paralegals need to know and need to really take seriously because at the oath ceremony, everyone was, connecting. Everyone was part of the same group, and I was very happy that there was many more seasoned paralegals in there and lawyers as well, to kind of make that happen and to introduce themselves. But to go to the paralegal speed mentoring and then obviously the welcome reception after that, that is where I think everyone needs to, if especially those that are licensed in the last little while or those that are soon to be licensed, really need to treat that as not just a nice free congratulations ceremony, but an opportunity to really show who you are, meet people who may extend you opportunities at the end of the day. The biggest thing I said to many of them as I was speed mentoring and was connecting, giving up my card, LinkedIn, so on and so forth, is I really owe one of my best experiences in becoming a paralegal to Miss Rhonda Bishop, who's a prosecutor for the region of Durham. But she has, I think she's works still practice, but she's a per diem prosecutor, I should say. But uh, when I was at Seneca, one of the courses I was taking said, go in person if you can to observe a court hearing and write a report on it. So, me being in Durham, I went to the Whitby courthouse and she was a prosecutor at the time. And not only did she, at first, she thought I was a defendant and she was asking me what case I was there for. And then I was kind of like, I'm just here to watch. I was like, I'm just observing. But she actually extended me several great opportunities to learn things through her, kind of shadow a little bit, and even provided a kind of a reference for me when I was getting my start. So that came from just being in the room. Same, imagine that times several when you're in a networking space, when you're at a CPD, when you're at some form of connection with other legal professionals, especially those that have more skin in the game than you. It's not, it's not an embarrassing thing to kind of say, hi, my name is Sawyer. Who are you and what do you do? That's not an embarrassing thing to do in those spaces. And it's actually rather implored. So, especially for those that are just starting out, many people in this profession are just looking to help others. And that was one of the greatest things that I learned from day one. And that's partly why I love the legal profession is that, a lot of people like to say, lawyers and paralegals are crazy, litigious, all these things. But I couldn't have had the farthest experience from that. And really, I think that that's where you have to take it a step further and go from there in those networking spaces.
Perfect. So, Sawyer, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with us here today. Now, to wrap up here on the phenomenal paralegal podcast and the Justice and Pieces guest speaker series, what final words of wisdom do you have for paralegal students, licensed newly licensed paralegals, as well as how they can become phenomenal paralegals of their own?
I'm gonna try and keep this short, but I'll keep it to 3 points. Is like for new paralegals, newer paralegals, and those that are just kind of getting their foot in the door. Like be absolutely proficient in all the paralegal rules of conduct, guidelines, everything they're in. That is 90% of being a good paralegal at the end of the day. Knowing all that stuff, not having, questions on what if, y- read that thing through and through. It's not just something to get you through the licensing exam, and it's not just something to, refer to. It is your code at the end of the day. You need to know that going forward, because you'll experience that every day. Second thing I would say is if you are looking for roles, you're looking for opportunities, and you are not getting them, make opportunities happen. Register, a firm, or keep your like get it individual insurance, get your notary, get some experience through that. Fight traffic tickets for your friends and family. Do something to get the experience if you are not getting hired in these spaces, because at the end of the day, the best, that great, amazing paralegal role may not be out there for some time. And if it does, sometimes it has a experience requirement for it. So if you could do things of get past the court jitters of, representing a friend in some sort of matter, or getting a referral from someone, really that is how you can get some experience and go forward at the end of the day. And really, just the last thing is be proud of where you are, because it takes a lot to get a paralegal license at the end of the day. And really hold it with some honor, because many people don't know, but the first degrees that were ever actually given out at like the first like official university after the Roman period were law degrees. And the law is a very important thing. It's existed as long as time itself. I think it truly is the oldest profession, not the other one that people often joke about, but you know, arguing and knowing the law and advocating is, it is a great, great opportunity, and getting to do it in any scope is truly a gift. So really be proud of where you're at, and remember that when there's days of, feeling, did you make the right choice? There's some days I quit being a paralegal a million times a day, but I truly would not see myself doing anything else. So I hope you guys have the same experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sawyer, and thanks for everyone for tuning in to another edition of our Phenomenal Paralegals podcast. Thanks as well to all our sponsors: Accounting for Law, Caseway, JC Paralegal Services, Howie Sachs and Henry LLP Personal Injury Lawyers, and Marshall Legal Services, Lori and Carl Marshall. All the best, Sawyer, and thanks for everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.
Have a good night.